Islamic Spain has been an important source of objects for the Victoria and Albert Museum since it was founded. And that's largely to do with the influence of one of the great designers in the 19th century, Owen Jones. And he first went to the Alhambra in the 1830s and really discovered the Alhambra for the British public. And his connection with the first director of the Victoria and Albert Museum and the founders of the museum meant that the influence of Islamic art, and especially the Islamic art of Spain, was fundamental to the first objects that were collected by the museum. So from the 1850s and 1860s, when the museum first started collecting objects, we've been collecting material from Islamic Spain, and especially from the Alhambra. So we have this enormous collection now of nazaríen material, which covers plaster panels from the building itself of the Alhambra, silk textiles, and luster ceramics. So luster was one of the important types of ceramic production made in Granada, or made in the Nazarid Kingdom. And we have a very large collection of objects, some complete objects and also many fragments. And many of the fragments have been excavated from a site in Egypt called Fustat, which was the historic capital before the foundation of Cairo. And our collection of that material largely comes from other collectors. So the V&A commonly bought whole collections when they were founding the collection in the 19th century. So what was the normal process was that somebody, a British soldier or civil servant, would be based in Cairo, make a collection, possibly by visiting the site of Fustat itself, which was a big archaeological site already in the 19th century, or by buying from dealers in Cairo. And then when they came back to England, they often offered their collections to the V&A, so we would buy the whole collection, or they gave the whole collection. So many of the fragments that we have been studying for this project come from one particular collection, which was given to us in 1921 by somebody called George Hornblower. In terms of selecting these objects for the REMAI project, for me it was important to understand more about the production of these ceramics. So there was this interesting fact that they'd been found in Egypt and obviously exported there through trade. But I didn't feel I knew enough about their production context and what the objects originally were, or how they would have been decorated. So the REMAI project offered the opportunity to collaborate with other specialists in ceramics, and especially people that work in a very focused way on nazarid ceramics, and just to understand, to share expertise and to understand from them more about the local production context of these objects, and to compare our fragments with fragments that they have in the Alhambra collection, just to see more about the original shapes of some of these objects, especially the lids and what their missing elements would have looked like. So one of the ways that we wanted to investigate the production context in a more focused way was to analyse the bodies of these ceramics that we've selected for the project. And so we've taken samples of the clay body of all of the pieces, and wherever they have interesting pigments, we've analysed those. We've also analysed the glaze layer so that we can hopefully understand more about the components of the tin glaze, and where they don't have a tin glaze layer, just to understand more about the glazing technology that was used. We took the samples here ourselves, and we sent all of the samples to the Louvre lab for the analysis to be conducted there. So for the objects that we selected from our ceramics collection for the REMAI project include these 4 pieces of luster, and these were all excavated at Fustat, which is a site in Egypt near Cairo. And what was interesting for our research on the REMAI project was why these examples of nazarid luster had been found in Egypt. So I've been researching the context of Mediterranean trade of this type of ceramic. So these are all made in the Nazarid realm. This one is interesting because it's got an inscription in the base that gives the name of the place that it was made. And this is the Arabic word for Malaga. So this piece, we know, was made in Malaga, which was very close to Granada, which was the capital of the Nazarid kingdom, and was also a major port. So the port was the point at which the ceramics were exported, but was also apparently the place where they were made. So this is one of the pieces that was found at Fustat, and in terms of its decoration, it's not particularly interesting. It's obviously a bowl, but it's fascinating that it's one of very few pieces that have survived that have this word Malaga in its base. So we have this documentary evidence of it being an export from Malaga. One of the things we wanted to find out from analysing these objects was where some of these other pieces were made. So we've analysed all of these fragments. You can see where we took the sample from for this piece, and we're still awaiting the analysis results. What is interesting about this fragment is that it comes from the neck of one of these enormous ceramics that are known as Alhambra vases. And these are sometimes 2 meters high. They're absolutely enormous. They seem to have had no particular function apart from decoration. But because this piece is also excavated at Fustat in Egypt, it gives us the evidence that these objects were also exported. So it remains a mystery why they were exported. They're unglazed on the inside, so they were not used for storing or transporting liquids. So they may have just been decorative objects that were given as gifts from the Nasrids to the Mamluks who were ruling in Egypt at the time. The other 2 pieces here are examples of bowls, and this is a very distinctive shape of bowl that came into Islamic ceramics in Spain in the late 12th, early 13th century, and is characteristic of pieces made in the Nasrid period. So what characterises all of these ceramics is that they are made with a very red-coloured clay and covered with a white layer of glaze, and that's a very opaque tin glaze, and this is very characteristic of the lustreware that's produced in Spain. And you can see, hopefully you can see the reflection on the lustre on this piece, which really captures why lustre was such an appealing type of decoration. It's decoration made with silver and copper oxides, so it's quite an expensive type of ceramic to produce, and it probably imitated precious metal work. So this would be the bowl, and this piece here is interesting because it was probably from a lid, and it would have been the lid that sat on top of a bowl like this. You can see it's double-sided, the decoration. This is the outside of the lid, and we would have had in the centre here some kind of knob for lifting the lid. This would probably have been originally quite big, so about 50 centimetres in diameter, and bigger than this bowl. This is probably quite close to the foot ring. And the inscription around the outside of the knop, central knop, is a cursive Arabic inscription which just gives a string of blessings. It says, well-being, good fortune, prosperity and blessing. So this is a very common type of inscription that you have on Islamic ceramics, especially where they contain food. So the blessings inscribed on the objects give a blessing over the food that's about to be eaten. Another object that we analysed and studied for this project is this. So this is a different type of object. This does not come from Egypt. This was found in Malaga. And this is interesting because it is probably a border tile from a tomb, a grave. And you would have had at one end of the grave an upright tile marking the head of the grave, and then the grave itself was surrounded by a whole string of bricks like this. And this seems to be very particular to Malaga, so all of the examples that we've been able to find in our comparative study of this object have been found at Malaga as well. So this is probably a 14th century tile from a grave. And again, it's got blessings. This is al-afia, this means well-being, so it's just repeated on both sides. It would have been buried in the ground up to about this point, so we've got the shiny glaze here in the part that was above ground, and this part has either lost its glaze or was never glazed. And then all of these tomb tiles have this sort of zigzag pattern on the top, which we haven't been able to figure out exactly why. But what's interesting is that it uses blue, and cobalt blue, which would have been the pigment used to make this colour, starts to be used in Islamic ceramics in Spain in the 13th century. And you can see the luster pieces that we've looked at, apart from one spot on this bowl fragment, don't have any blue, although blue was quite often combined with luster. But this, I was interested to look into the beginnings of blue in Spanish ceramics and to see where the blue was coming from. And it seems that there were locally available cobalt sources in northern Spain, but also that potentially the cobalt was being imported from much further east on the same kind of Mediterranean trade routes that were bringing these fragments from Spain to Egypt.